Just thought I was teaching a rude, drunk guest a lesson in manners. I didn't know he had an identical twin watching from the dark. And I definitely didn't know that the man I just spat on was the nice one. When the Alpha King stepped into the light, he didn't call the guards. He didn't order my execution. He looked at the saliva sliding down his brother's Italian leather shoe, then looked up at my mouth with a dark, terrifying hunger. "You missed," he growled. Now I'm trapped in a castle with two identical men, and the only way to tell them apart is that one wants to play games and the other wants to own my soul. I have no idea which one is which. Hello, Wolfpack. Welcome back to Raven's Romance Library, your sanctuary for the wildest, most addictive shifter stories on the internet. I am so ready to dive into today's drama with you. But first, I want to do a quick roll call. Where in the world are you listening from right now? And more importantly, do you have a furry reading buddy with you? Drop your location and your pet's name in the comments below. I love seeing who is in the pack today. Also, if you hate cliffhangers as much as I do and want to binge these episodes before anyone else, hit that join button to become a library member. You'll get early access to the saga and some gorgeous loyalty badges next to your name. Now, grab your coffee, get comfortable, and let's see what trouble the Alpha is getting into today. Let's read. Chapter 1. I didn't just insult the man. I gathered every ounce of frustration, saliva, and cheap champagne swirling in my mouth and launched it directly at his foot. Splat. It was a magnificent shot. A wet, frothy glob of disrespect landed squarely on the toe of his polished black Italian leather loafer. It shone in the moonlight like a badge of honor. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and glared at him. Call my dress a discount curtain one more time, rich boy. I dare you. The man in the tuxedo froze. He was gorgeous, in that irritating, symmetrical way that aristocrats always were. High cheekbones, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and hair the color of midnight. He had been stomping on the prize-winning hydrangeas and smoking a clove cigarette when I found him, and his first instinct had been to mock my outfit. Now, he just stared at his shoe. He blinked. Once. Twice. Then a slow, bewildered grin spread across his face. "Did you—" He looked up, his eyes dancing with amusement. "Did you just spit on me?" "I can do it again if the first one didn't register," I snapped, crossing my arms. "I don't care who your father is. You don't insult a woman who is already wearing a corset that is trying to rearrange her internal organs. Apologize." He laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh. It was delighted. "You have no idea who I am, do you? I know you're rude, you have terrible taste in cigarettes, and your shoe is now wet. That's all the bio I need." He opened his mouth to retort, likely to tell me he owned the building or the city or my entire bloodline. But a sound from the shadows cut him off. It was a low, vibrating growl. It felt less like a sound and more like the earth shifting beneath my heels. "You missed." The voice was deep, baritone. It was the kind of voice that bypassed your ears and vibrated directly in your chest cavity. I spun around. Stepping out from the darkness of the trellis was a monster. Okay, not a monster. A man. A tall, broad-shouldered wall of a man wearing a tuxedo identical to the one on the smoker. He stepped into the sliver of moonlight, and my breath hitched in my throat. He had the same face, the exact same midnight hair, the same sharp jawline. But where the smoker felt like a flickering candle, this new man felt like a forest fire. The air around him seemed to drop 10 degrees. He wasn't smiling. He was staring at me with eyes so dark they looked like voids, tracking the rise and fall of my chest with predatory focus. I looked back at the smoker, then at the shadow man. Twins. Oh, crap, I whispered. The shadow man ignored his brother completely. He took slow, deliberate steps toward me, his expensive shoes crunching on the gravel. He stopped inches from me. He smelled like rain, ozone, and something dangerously masculine. You missed, he repeated, his voice devoid of humor. He pointed a long, calloused finger at his brother. That is the spare. I am the husband. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. The husband. The king. Alpha Magnus. I had just spat on the brother of the most powerful wolf on the continent. I swallowed hard, trying to find my voice. Technically, I didn't miss. I aimed for him. He was being a jerk. The smoker, Miles presumably, chuckled, wiping his shoe on the grass. She's got spirit, Mags. She told me I looked like a depressed penguin. Discount curtain, I corrected instinctively, then immediately regretted it. Magnus didn't look at his brother. He didn't blink. He leaned down, invading my personal space until his lips were hovering just above my ear. The heat radiating off him was suffocating. You have spirit, Magnus murmured, but you have terrible aim. If you are going to disrespect a royal, Vera, ensure you disrespect the right one. He knew my name. I'm leaving, I squeaked, taking a step back. I'll just go. No, Magnus said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The single syllable was a command that locked my knees in place. He reached out. I flinched, expecting a strike. Instead, his hand, large, warm, and heavy, wrapped around my chin, tilting my face up to his. His thumb brushed over my bottom lip, rough against the soft skin. You made a mess, he whispered, his eyes dropping to his brother's ruined shoe, then back to my lips. And in this family, we don't call the maids to clean up our messes. We make the offender do it. I slapped his hand away. I am not cleaning his shoe. Magnus's eyes narrowed. For a second, I thought I saw a flash of gold in his irises. The amusement was gone, replaced by a challenge. I wasn't talking about the shoe, he said softly. I'm talking about the insult. You owe a debt now, and I intend to collect it personally. He straightened up, buttoning his jacket with terrifying calmness. Lock the garden gates, he said to the empty air. She doesn't leave until she learns the difference between a prince and a king. And then, the heavy iron gates behind me slammed shut with a deafening clang. Chapter 2. The clang of the iron gates echoed through the garden like a prison sentence. I didn't flinch, mostly because my legs were currently made of gelatin, but I refused to let either of them see it. You can't keep me here, I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. Kidnapping is a felony, even for royalty. I have rights. I have a phone. I have a very aggressive chihuahua waiting at home who requires medication. Miles, the smoker, was leaning against a marble statue, shaking with silent laughter. He looked at his brother, then at me, as if this was the best reality TV show he had ever binged. Magnus didn't look at Miles. He didn't look at the gates. He only looked at me. He took a slow, deliberate step forward, crowding me against the trellis. The scent of him, rain and cold earth, was overwhelming, drowning out the sweet smell of the flowers. "I am not kidnapping you, Vera," Magnus said, his voice smooth and terrifyingly calm. "I am inviting you to dinner, to discuss your debt." "I don't owe you a debt," I argued, pressing my back against the thorny vines of a rose bush. "I spat on him, and he deserved it." "And yet," Magnus said, sliding a hand into the breast pocket of his tuxedo, "he is my blood. An insult to the spare is an insult to the heir. You dirtied the family name, literally." He pulled out a square of white silk, a handkerchief. It was monogrammed with gold thread, probably worth more than my car. He held it out to me. I stared at it. "What is this?" "A cleaning implement," Magnus said. He gestured vaguely toward Miles's shoe. "Kneel. Clean it." The air left the garden. Miles stopped laughing. He straightened up, looking from Magnus to me, his expression suddenly unreadable. "Mags," Miles started, his tone cautious. "You don't have to—" "Quiet," Magnus snapped without looking at him. His dark eyes bored into mine. "She has a lot of fire for a trespasser. Let's see if she has any humility. Kneel, Vera. Wipe the spit off my brother's shoe, and I will open the gate." My blood boiled. It started in my toes and shot up to my face. He wanted me to bow? To scrape? He wanted the "Oh, please, your majesty" routine. I took the handkerchief. The silk was cool against my skin. Magnus smirked. It was a small, victorious tilt of his lips. He thought he had won. He thought I was just another social climber terrified of his power. I took a step toward Miles. Miles looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight. "Look, it's really not a big deal." I didn't kneel. Instead, I balled the expensive silk into a tight fist, wound up like a pitcher in the bottom of the ninth, and threw it as hard as I could. It sailed past Miles completely. It hit Magnus. The silk ball bounced off the center of his chest, right over his heart, and fluttered harmlessly to the grass. Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Miles's jaw dropped. Magnus looked down at the white square on the grass. Then he looked up at me. His face wasn't angry. It was stunned, as if the concept of someone throwing laundry at him was a physics impossibility he couldn't compute. "I don't do knees," I said, lifting my chin. "And I don't clean shoes. If you want it clean, lick it off yourself." My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I had just signed my death warrant. I braced myself for the guards, for the shouting, for the dungeon. Instead, a low sound rumbled in Magnus's chest. He stepped over the handkerchief. He closed the distance between us in one stride, gripping my upper arm. His fingers were steel bands, but they didn't hurt. He pulled me closer, so close I could see the flecks of silver in his obsidian eyes. "Finally," he breathed, the scent of mint and danger washing over me. "Someone with a spine." He didn't let go. He turned me toward the castle doors, his grip possessive, steering me not toward the exit, but toward the grand entrance. "You're not leaving," he growled into my ear. "You're sitting next to me at dinner. I want to see what else you throw when you get angry." Chapter 3. The royal dining room was designed to make people feel small. The ceiling was 30 feet high, painted with frescoes of wolves tearing apart stags. The table was long enough to land a plane on, and I was the entertainment. Magnus sat at the head of the table, looking like a dark god on his throne. Miles sat to his left. And because the universe hated me, Magnus had ordered a chair placed immediately to his right. I was the meat in a royal twin sandwich. Servants moved invisibly around us, placing plates of food I couldn't pronounce in front of me. The tension was thick enough to cut with the silver knife I was currently gripping like a weapon. "So," Miles said, breaking the silence. He had recovered his playful demeanor, leaning back in his chair and swirling his wine. "Vera, that's a nice name. Latin for truth, right? Are you always this honest with your bodily fluids?" I glared at him, stabbing a potato. "Only when provoked?" "And you provoked me." "I said your dress looked like a curtain," Miles defended, grinning. "It was a fashion critique. I was being helpful." "It's vintage," I snapped. "It's flammable," Magnus corrected. He hadn't touched his food. He was watching me eat. He watched me cut the meat. He watched me chew. It was unnerving. "Eat, Vera. You look like you survive on coffee and anxiety." "I'm an art restorer," I muttered. "That is my diet." "An art restorer," Magnus repeated, his voice dropping an octave. "Someone who fixes broken things. Interesting." He took a sip of his wine, his eyes never leaving my face. The way he looked at me made my skin prickle. It wasn't the look of a man annoyed by a guest. It was the look of a collector spotting a rare artifact. Suddenly, I felt a pressure on my knee. A hand. A warm, large hand sliding up my thigh under the tablecloth. I froze. It had to be Miles. He was the party boy, the flirt. He had been winking at me since we sat down. Magnus was too cold, too controlled for public groping. Miles was trying to get a rise out of me. He was testing limits. Well, I had limits. I didn't look down. I didn't stop chewing. I just shifted my leg, lined up my heel, which was a 3-inch stiletto purely designed for aesthetic torture, and brought it down. Hard. Crunch. I felt the satisfying impact of heel meeting leather and bone. I waited for Miles to yelp. I waited for him to jump or spill his wine. Miles continued to smile, taking a bite of his steak. "Excellent seasoning on this, brother. Really top tier." He didn't flinch. Slowly, terrifyingly, I turned my head to the right. Magnus had stopped moving. His wine glass was suspended halfway to his mouth. His face was perfectly still, a mask of stone. But the stem of his crystal wine glass suddenly snapped. Ping! Red wine spilled over his hand, dripping onto the pristine white tablecloth like blood. He didn't look at his hand. He slowly turned his head to look at me. His pupils were blown wide, swallowing the iris. A vein pulsed in his temple. "Vera," he whispered, his voice vibrating through the table. Oh no, I had stomped on the king. I stammered, dropping my fork. I thought it was Miles. I thought he was touching me." Magnus placed the broken glass on the table. He leaned in, closing the distance between us until his lips were inches from mine. The entire room seemed to shrink down to just his furious, heated gaze. "If you touch me like that again," he murmured, his voice rough with a dark promise, "we are not finishing dinner. Do you understand?" I couldn't breathe. I nodded, terrified and aroused? No, just terrified. Definitely. Before I could answer, the double doors at the end of the room burst open. "Magnus, Miles, we heard you had a stray dog at the table." Two women swept into the room. They were identical twins, just like the men, but blonde, polished, and radiating pure malice. The Sterling sisters. Magnus sat back, his eyes cold. "Right on time," he muttered. "The vultures are here." Chapter 4. Portia and Prudence Sterling didn't walk. They glided. They were wearing matching silver gowns that probably cost more than my entire college tuition. They were beautiful, in the way a freshly sharpened guillotine blade is beautiful. And they knew exactly who was who. Magnus, darling, the one on the left. Portia, I assumed, based on the slightly larger diamond necklace, cooed, breezing past Miles to curtsy deeply to the king. She ignored his bleeding hand. "We heard a rumor that a caterer had assaulted the prince." "She's not a caterer," Miles said, sounding bored. "She's a guest, and she missed." Prudence giggled, sliding into the seat next to Miles. "A guest? Dressed like that?" She looked at me, her blue eyes raking over my thrifted dress with clinical disdain. "Oh, you poor thing. Did you lose a bet?" "I like it," I said, gripping my napkin. "It has character, something you wouldn't understand since you bought your personalities off a mannequin." Miles choked on his water, hiding a laugh. Portia's smile tightened. She walked around the table, stopping behind my chair. "Feisty. I suppose that's charming in a rustic sort of way. Like a feral cat." She reached for a carafe of red wine on the sideboard. "More wine, Magnus? You seem to have spilled yours." "Portia," Magnus warned, his voice low. "Oops." It happened in slow motion. Portia tilted the carafe. She didn't even pretend to trip. She just poured a stream of heavy, dark Cabernet Sauvignon directly onto my shoulder. The cold liquid soaked instantly into the fabric, running down my back and chest, ruining the vintage lace. "Oh no," Portia gasped, her hand over her mouth, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "My hand slipped. I am so clumsy. But really, dear, that dress was a disaster anyway. I did you a favor." Cold rage washed over me. It wasn't just the dress. It was the smirk, the entitlement, the assumption that I would just sit there and take it because she was a Sterling and I was a nobody. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You clumsy witch," I hissed. I reached for the water pitcher in front of me. It was heavy, crystal, and full of ice water. I was going to drench her. I was going to ruin that silver gown and her perfect blowout. A hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Magnus. He stopped my hand midair. "Stop," he commanded. My heart sank. Of course. He was the king. He wasn't going to let a stray insult a noblewoman. He was going to protect his own kind. I tried to yank my wrist back, tears of frustration stinging my eyes. "Let go of me! She ruined my dress!" "I said stop," Magnus repeated calmly. He stood up, towering over both of us. He didn't look at Portia. He looked at the water pitcher in my hand. "That is water, Vera," he said, his voice flat. "Water dries. It doesn't stain." He gently pried the water pitcher from my fingers and set it down. Then he reached across the table and picked up a full, unopened bottle of Shiraz. He pulled the cork out with his teeth, spat it onto the table, and placed the heavy bottle into my hand. Portia's smile vanished. "Magnus?" Magnus looked at me, his eyes dark and burning with that same intense obsession I had seen in the garden. He curled my fingers around the neck of the bottle. "If you are going to attack my guests," Magnus whispered, a wicked smirk touching his lips, "do it properly. Red stains better. Don't miss." I looked at the bottle. I looked at Portia, whose face had gone pale. I smiled. "Thanks, Your Majesty." I said. And I swung the bottle. Chapter 5. I woke up in a bed that cost more than my entire education. The sheets were made of something that felt like woven clouds, and the pillows were so fluffy, I thought I might have accidentally suffocated during the night. My head was pounding. Memories of the dinner flashed in my mind like a strobe light. The wine bottle, the arc of red liquid, Portia shrieking like a banshee as the Shiraz ruined her silver gown. And Magnus watching me with that dark, terrified satisfaction. I groaned and rolled over, burying my face in the pillow. I am going to jail. I am definitely going to jail. Jail has worse coffee. I checked. I shrieked, scrambling backward until I hit the headboard. Standing in the doorway was a twin. He was shirtless, and oh, sweet baby Jesus, he was carved out of marble. He had broad shoulders, abs that looked like a topographical map of bad decisions I wanted to make, and sweatpants that hung dangerously low on his hips. He was holding a silver tray with a steaming porcelain cup and a croissant. He smiled. It was a soft, crooked smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Good morning, sunshine," he said, walking into the room. "I brought you caffeine, and a croissant, and aspirin, in that order." I stared at him. It had to be Magnus. Miles had been mocking me all dinner, but Magnus had handed me the bottle. Magnus had defended me. This sweet domestic act felt like an apology for the chaos. My heart did a traitorous little flip. I started, my voice raspy. "You didn't have to do this. I threw a bottle at your guest. She deserved it," he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. He placed the tray on the nightstand and handed me the coffee. "Portia has been needing a wine bath for a decade. You just expedited the process." He smelled like sandalwood and something warm, like baked bread. He leaned in, bracing his hands on the mattress on either side of my legs. The proximity was dizzying. "How is your hand?" I asked softly, glancing at his fingers. I thought I saw you cut it on the glass." He looked at his hand. Smooth, unblemished. "Heals fast. Wolf perks." He winked. I took a sip of the coffee. It was perfect. "Thank you for last night, for stopping her, for not letting them throw me out." He chuckled, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated the mattress. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was gentle, lingering on my cheek. "You're entertaining, Vera. I like entertaining." "It gets so boring around here with all the bowing and scraping." I leaned into his touch, my guard dropping. "I thought you were the scary one, the Ice King. You're actually nice." He froze. Then a wicked, boyish grin split his face. He threw his head back and laughed. "Oh, sweetheart, you really are bad at this game." My stomach dropped. "What?" "I'm not the Ice King," he said, his eyes dancing with mischief. "I'm the fun one." Miles. I snatched my hand back like I'd been burned. You let me think." "I didn't say anything," Miles defended, grabbing a grape from the tray and popping it into his mouth. "You assumed. It's not my fault we share a face." "Get out!" I pointed at the door, cheeks burning with humiliation. "You are impossible." "I am delightful," Miles corrected. He leaned in again, his voice dropping to a flirtatious whisper. "And for the record, if you ever want to see who's a better kisser, my schedule is wide open." Bam! The bedroom door didn't just open, it hit the wall with enough force to crack the plaster. Magnus stood in the doorway. He was wearing a three-piece charcoal suit, impeccable and sharp. He took in the scene instantly. Miles shirtless on the bed, me flushing red, his hand near my face. The temperature in the room plummeted. Magnus didn't shout. He didn't growl. He just stared at Miles with a look that promised violence. "Out." Magnus said. One word. Absolute command. Miles sighed, rolling his eyes, but he stood up immediately. The playfulness vanished, replaced by a wary submission. We were just having breakfast, Mags. Relax. Out. Magnus repeated, louder this time. Before I remind you why I am the firstborn. Miles grabbed the croissant and bolted. Magnus didn't watch him leave. He walked into the room, kicking the door shut behind him. He stalked toward the bed, looming over me like a storm cloud. He didn't look like the man who handed me the wine bottle anymore. He looked like the king who locked the gates. Get dressed, he ordered, his voice devoid of warmth. Playtime is over. Chapter 6. Magnus didn't wait for me to shower. He gave me exactly 10 minutes to put on a fresh outfit, a severe black dress provided by the staff that made me look like a mourning widow, and then marched me down 3 flights of stairs to the West Wing. He didn't speak. He didn't look at me. He radiated a cold, angry energy that made the servants flatten themselves against the walls as we passed. He opened a set of double oak doors and shoved me inside. It was a library, but not a cozy one. It was the ice room. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, black marble fireplace, and air conditioning set to Arctic tundra. In the center was a massive mahogany desk cluttered with documents. Magnus walked behind the desk and sat down, lacing his fingers together. He gestured to the uncomfortable wooden chair opposite him. Sit. I sat, crossing my arms. If you're going to yell at me for the wine incident, just get it over with. I'll pay for the carpet cleaning. The carpet is fine, Magnus said dismissively, and Portia has been banned from the estate for property damage. I don't care about the wine. I blinked. Then, why are you looking at me like I just kicked a puppy? Because, Magnus said, leaning forward, his dark eyes locking onto mine. I walked into a guest suite and found my brother half naked on your bed. Do you have a habit of collecting strays, Vera? Or do you just have zero survival instinct? He brought me coffee, I argued. I thought it was you. Magnus went still. You thought it was me? Yes, because he was being nice. And you, well, you handed me a weapon last night. I thought maybe you had a personality under all that starch. Magnus stared at me for a long, agonizing moment. Then he opened a leather folder on his desk and slid a piece of paper toward me. I am not nice, Vera. I am the king, and you are currently trespassing, guilty of assaulting a royal guest, and liable for the destruction of a vintage rug, which, contrary to your offer, you cannot afford to clean. The bill is $40,000. My jaw dropped. 40? For a rug? However, Magnus continued, ignoring my panic, I have a solution. I looked into your background. You are a restoration specialist, the best in the city for Renaissance oil paintings. He tapped the paper. The castle's gallery has been neglected for 50 years. The varnish is yellowing. The canvases are sagging. I need someone to restore them. I looked at the contract. It was a employment agreement, an exclusive one. You want me to work for you? I want you to work off your debt, Magnus corrected. You will live here. You will restore the collection. Once the debt is paid, you leave. It was a trap. I knew it was a trap. But it was a trap that paid off a debt I couldn't handle. And honestly, the thought of getting my hands on the royal collection was a professional dream. Fine, I said, reaching for the pen. I'll do it. But I have conditions. No more locking me in gardens. And Miles stays out of my room. Magnus's hand shot out, covering the paper before I could sign. I have a condition too, he said. His voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and dangerous. You are to stay away from the spare. You do not eat with him. You do not speak to him. And you certainly do not let him on your bed. Why? I challenged. Are you jealous? It was a reckless question. Magnus stood up. He walked around the desk, leaning down until his face was level with mine. He smelled of rain and ink. Jealousy implies I am worried about competition, he murmured, brushing a thumb over my pulse point. I am not. I am territorial. There is a difference. Sign the paper, Vera, before I decide to just lock you in the dungeon instead. I signed. My hand shook, but I signed. Magnus pulled the paper away, inspecting the signature. Good. Welcome to the staff. He turned his back to me. Now get out. I have a country to run. And Vera? I paused at the door. Yes? He looked over his shoulder. His face was stone, but his eyes were burning. Lesson 1 of your employment. I don't smile. Don't expect me to start now. Chapter 7. 3 days. I had been stuck in this castle for 3 days, and I was pretty sure the paint fumes were starting to make me hallucinate. My studio was the North Tower, a circular room with high windows that let in the cruel, unforgiving sunlight, perfect for restoration work. It was quiet, dusty, and lonely. I was currently working on a 17th century portrait of a stern-looking alpha who looked vaguely like Magnus, if Magnus had a handlebar mustache and a vitamin D deficiency. I was carefully removing layers of yellowed varnish with a cotton swab and a solvent mixture that smelled like death. The door creaked open. I didn't turn around. If that's lunch, just put it on the table, and tell the chef that if I see another cucumber sandwich, I am going to revolt. No answer. Just the sound of heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate. I paused, the cotton swab hovering over the canvas. The air in the room shifted. It became heavier, charged with static electricity. I turned around on my stool. A twin was sitting in the velvet armchair in the corner. He was wearing a white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that were thick with muscle and dusted with dark hair. He had a stack of files on his lap. He didn't look at me. He was reading. Your Majesty? I asked tentatively. He turned a page. Scritch. Miles? I tried. He didn't react to either name. He just sat there, reading his documents, utterly ignoring my existence. Okay. Weird power move. I turned back to the painting. Ignore him. Just do your job. I went back to swabbing. But my skin was prickling. I could feel his eyes on me. Every time I leaned forward to reach a high corner of the canvas, my dress, which was a little shorter than regulation, rode up slightly. I felt a heat on the back of my legs that had nothing to do with the sun. 10 minutes passed. 20. The silence wasn't awkward. It was heavy, intimate. The only sounds were the scratch of my cotton swab and the rustle of his papers. It felt like we were a married couple who had been together for decades, comfortable in the quiet. I found myself humming. Just a little. I stopped immediately, unprofessional. Don't stop, a voice said from the corner. I spun around. He was looking at me now. The file was closed. He was leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, his chin resting on his clasped hands. His eyes were dark, unfathomable voids. I disturb you, I stammered. "You disturb me regardless of the noise," he said cryptically. He stood up. He walked over to the easel. He stood directly behind me. He was so close I could feel the heat radiating off his chest against my back. He didn't touch me, but the proximity was suffocating. He leaned over my shoulder to inspect the painting. His cheek brushed against my hair. I froze, my breath hitching. He smelled like... I sniffed discreetly. Paper, old books, and vanilla? Wait, Magnus smelled like rain. Miles smelled like sandalwood. Who smelled like vanilla? "You missed a spot," he whispered, his breath ghosting over my ear. His hand came up, reaching around me to point at a tiny patch of varnish on the Alpha's collar. His arm boxed me in. For a second, I thought he was going to hug me, or strangle me, or kiss me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I haven't got there yet." "You rush," he murmured. "You attack the canvas like it's an enemy. Patience, Vera. The dirt isn't going anywhere." He pulled back. The loss of heat was instant and jarring. "I have meetings," he said, his voice back to a flat professional tone. He walked to the door. "Wait," I called out. Which one are you, today?" He stopped, his hand on the brass knob. He didn't turn around. "Does it matter?" he asked. "You seemed to enjoy the company." Then he left. I sat there for a full minute, staring at the closed door. My pulse was racing. I turned back to the easel. Stuck to the corner of the canvas was a yellow sticky note. He must have put it there when he reached over me. I pulled it off. In sharp, angular handwriting, it read, "You paint like you fight. Messy, but effective." There was no signature, just a small, crudely drawn smiley face. A smiley face? That had to be Miles. Magnus didn't smile. But the handwriting looked like slashed steel. I groaned, banging my head against the easel. I am going to lose my mind in this house. Chapter 8. I stared at the sticky note until the yellow paper blurred. Messy, but effective. "I'll show you messy," I muttered, sticking the note to my forehead as I stood up to stretch. My back popped in 3 places. I decided to take a 10-minute break to hunt down the kitchen staff and beg for a carbohydrate that wasn't a cucumber sandwich. I was gone for 15 minutes, 20, tops. When I pushed the heavy oak door to the tower open, the smell hit me first. Not the sharp chemical tang of solvent, the smell of fresh oil paint. "No," I breathed. I ran to the easel. The portrait, the 17th century masterpiece I had spent 3 days painstakingly cleaning, was destroyed. A jagged, violent slash ripped through the canvas, right across the Alpha's face. It wasn't just a tear. It was a murder. Someone had taken a palette knife and dragged it through the fabric with vicious force. "Oh, dear," a voice drawled from the shadows. "That looks expensive." I spun around. Leaning against the archway, examining her manicured nails, was Portia Sterling. Her sister Prudence was giggling behind her. "What did you do?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Not with fear, but with pure, white-hot rage. "Me?" Portia feigned shock, pressing a hand to her chest. "I just came to apologize for the misunderstanding at dinner, and I found this." She pointed a manicured finger at the floor. Lying at the base of the easel was my palette knife, covered in fresh paint. "You framed me," I said, stepping toward her. You slashed a priceless artifact just to get me fired? Fired? Portia laughed. It was a cold, jagged sound. Oh, honey, you don't get fired for destroying royal property. You get arrested. Security! 2 burly guards appeared instantly, as if they had been waiting in the hall. They flanked me, grabbing my arms. Don't touch me! I yanked my arm away, but their grip was iron. Take her to the king, Portia commanded, smiling like a cat who had just eaten the canary and the cage. He's in the great hall. I think he'll be very interested to see how his restorer treats his ancestors. They dragged me, literally dragged me, my heels skidding on the stone, down the spiral stairs and into the great hall. Magnus was there, standing by the fireplace with a group of advisors. He looked up as the doors banged open. "Sir," Portia announced, striding in with the ruined canvas in her hands like a trophy. "We caught her. The girl, she snapped. She destroyed the first alpha's portrait." The room went silent. Magnus looked at the slashed painting. His face was unreadable. He looked at me, held by 2 guards. "Is this true?" he asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. "No!" I shouted, shaking off one of the guards. "She did it. She's trying to frame me because I embarrassed her at dinner." "Lies," Prudence chimed in. "We saw her holding the knife. She was crying. She said the work was too hard and she hated you for trapping her here." It was a good lie. Plausible. The stressed artist narrative. Magnus walked slowly down the steps of the dais. He stopped in front of Portia. He looked at the painting. The slash was ugly, ruining the face of his great-great-grandfather. "A clean cut," Magnus observed. "Right through the eye." "She's unstable, Magnus," Portia purred, stepping closer to him. "You need to send her away. For her own good. I can recommend a facility." "Let her go," Magnus said. The guards hesitated. "Sir?" "I said." Magnus turned his gaze to the guards, and the temperature in the room dropped 50 degrees. "Let go of my employee." They released me instantly. I stumbled, rubbing my bruised arms. Magnus turned back to Portia. He took the painting from her hands. Then, calmly, effortlessly, he tossed the priceless historic artifact into the roaring fireplace. The canvas caught fire instantly. The oil paint sizzled. Portia shrieked. "Magnus, that was history!" "It was a picture of a dead man," Magnus said, dusting off his hands. He turned to me. He didn't look at the fire. He looked at the red marks on my arms where the guards had grabbed me. His jaw tightened. A muscle feathered in his cheek. "I don't care about the painting," Magnus growled, his voice vibrating through the floorboards. "I care that you dragged her. I care that she is shaking." He took a step toward Portia, who was now backing away, pale as a sheet. "You think I don't know the difference between a restoration knife and a dagger, Portia? That cut was made with a downward strike. Vera is left-handed. The angle is wrong." He knew I was left-handed. He had noticed. "Get out," Magnus whispered, "before I forget that I am a gentleman and throw you into the fire after the painting." The adrenaline crash was worse than the incident itself. After Magnus had banished the Sterling sisters, again, he had tried to talk to me. But I couldn't do it. I couldn't handle the intensity of his gaze, or the confusing fact that he had just burned $1 million worth of art to prove a point. So I ran. I hid in the library. It was the only room in the castle that felt safe, mostly because it smelled like old paper and not like aggressive masculinity. But then the storm came. It started as a low rumble, shaking the stone foundations of the castle. Then the sky opened up. Lightning flashed, illuminating the stained glass windows in horrific bursts of white light, followed immediately by thunder that sounded like a bomb going off. I hate storms. I don't just dislike them, I have a phobia. When I was 6, a tree fell on our house during a hurricane. The sound of thunder paralyzes me. Crack! The lights flickered and died. The castle plunged into absolute darkness. No, 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 I whispered, curling into a ball in the corner of a massive velvet armchair. I pulled my knees to my chest, burying my face in my hands. Just breathe. It's just noise. It's just noise. Another clap of thunder shook the floor. I let out a pathetic whimper, pressing my hands over my ears. I heard footsteps. They were soft, bare alive over the rain pounding against the glass. Someone was navigating the pitch-black room with perfect ease. Wolf vision. Vera. The voice was low. It wasn't Magnus's commanding baritone. It was softer, gentler. Go away, I choked out, trembling. Hey. The footsteps stopped right in front of my chair. It's okay. It's just a little rain. The generator will kick in soon. A hand touched my shoulder. It was warm, solid. I flinched, but the hand didn't pull away. It slid down my arm, grounding me. You're freezing, the voice said. There was a rustle of fabric. Then a heavy weight settled over my shoulders. A suit jacket. It was still warm from his body heat. It smelled like safety, like vanilla and bourbon and deep, earthy forest. I can't do the noise, I stammered, feeling like an idiot. I'm sorry. I'm a coward. Fear isn't cowardice, he murmured. He knelt down in front of me. I couldn't see him, but I could feel his presence. He was large, blocking out the rest of the room. It's an instinct. You're surviving. He started to hum. It wasn't a song. It was a low, vibrating purr deep in his chest. It was a sound I had never heard a human make. It resonated at a frequency that seemed to bypass my panic and soothe my nervous system directly. My heart rate slowed. The thunder outside seemed to fade into the background, drowned out by the steady, rhythmic rumbling of the man in front of me. I leaned forward, instinctively seeking that warmth. My forehead rested against his shoulder. He stiffened for a second, then relaxed, his hand coming up to stroke the back of my head. Thank you, Miles, I whispered into his shirt. You're really good at this. The humming stopped. The hand on my head froze. For a long, agonizing silence, he didn't move. The storm raged outside, but the stillness in the library was louder. Miles, he repeated. His voice sounded strained, rougher than before. Yeah, I mumbled, sleepy now from the adrenaline crash. Magnus would have just told the thunder to shut up. You're kind. The lights flashed back on. I blinked against the sudden brightness. I lifted my head. The space in front of me was empty. There was no one there. The library door was swinging gently shut. I frowned, confused. Had I imagined it? I looked down. I was wearing a suit jacket. It was charcoal gray, tailored to perfection. I pulled the lapel up to my nose to inhale that comforting scent again. And then I saw it. Stitched into the inner lining of the pocket in gold thread were initials, not MS for Miles Sterling. KM, King Magnus. My blood ran cold. I hadn't been crying on the nice brother. I had been cuddling the monster. Chapter 10. I think she's faking it. Of course she's faking it. She's a human. They have the sensory range of a potato. I sat in a chair in the center of the solarium, blindfolded with a silk scarf that smelled entirely too much like Portia's perfume. I can hear you, I said flatly. And for the record, potatoes are excellent conductors of electricity. So that's not the insult you think it is. Silence, Portia snapped. The test begins now. It was supposed to be a peace-offering tea party. It was actually an ambush. The Sterling sisters had challenged me to a mate test. Their logic was simple. If I was truly close enough to the royal family to live in the castle, I should be able to identify the king without my eyes. If I failed, they would have proof I was just a meaningless employee. If I passed, well, I had no intention of failing. The rules are simple, Prudence announced. The twins are standing in front of you. You may touch their hands, nothing else. You must identify the king. This is ridiculous, a male voice muttered. It sounded like Miles. Or maybe Magnus sounding annoyed. I couldn't rely on the voice. They were mimicking each other to mess with me. Proceed, Magnus's voice commanded. Or was it Miles? I took a deep breath. Focus. Don't look like an idiot. I reached out to the left. A hand took mine. It was smooth. The skin was soft, like someone who moisturized religiously. The fingers interlaced with mine playfully, giving a little squeeze. The thumb rubbed the back of my hand in a teasing circle. I felt nothing. Well, I felt a hand. It was nice. Friendly. I said neutrally. I dropped the hand and reached to the right. My fingers brushed against a sleeve, a wrist. Then a hand engulfed mine. The difference was violent. This hand was rough, calloused. The palm was hard, the skin hot, burning hot, running a fever of pure alpha energy. As soon as our skin connected, a shock of static electricity zapped up my arm, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. My pulse jumped. The hand didn't squeeze. It held. It was possessive, unyielding. I could feel the pulse in his wrist hammering against my fingertips. Slow, heavy, powerful thuds. I inhaled. There it was. Underneath the soap and the starch of the cuff, rain, ozone, and that deep, terrifying calm that smelled like the eye of a hurricane. My body reacted before my brain did. My knees went weak. I wanted to lean into him. I wanted to climb him like a tree. Logic said, choose the nice one. Choose the one who brought you coffee. Instinct screamed, mine. Well? Portia demanded. Clock is ticking, potato girl. I didn't let go of the rough hand. I couldn't. The one on the left is Miles, I said, my voice barely a whisper. He holds hands like he's on a date. I tightened my grip on the burning hand to my right. This one, I said breathlessly. This is the king. Silence. How? Portia gasped. She cheated. She peeked. She didn't peek. The voice on my right growled. I reached up and pulled the blindfold down. Magnus was standing in front of me. He wasn't looking at the sisters. He was looking at our joined hands, then up at my face. His eyes were blown wide, swirling with a mixture of shock and dark, predatory satisfaction. He lifted my hand to his mouth. He didn't kiss the back of it like a gentleman. He turned it over and pressed his lips to the sensitive skin of my wrist, right over my racing pulse. "Good girl," he murmured against my skin. My knees finally gave out. Chapter 11. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the phantom heat of Magnus's lips on my wrist. Good girl. The two words echoed in my brain like a curse, or a prayer. I wasn't sure which one scared me more. The castle was suffocating. I needed to breathe. I needed cold water to shock my system back into reality. I grabbed a towel and slipped out of my room at 2 a.m., heading for the indoor solarium pool. It was a glass-enclosed masterpiece filled with tropical plants and moonlit water. And, crucially, it was supposed to be empty at this hour. I didn't bother with a swimsuit. I didn't have one. I was wearing a white silk slip dress that I used as pajamas, stolen from the guest wardrobe, naturally. I figured I would just dip my legs in, but the water looked so inviting. I sat on the edge, dangling my feet. Then I slid in. The cold water gasped against my heated skin, a blessed relief. I ducked my head under, letting the silence of the deep end wash away the memory of Magnus's touch. I surfaced, slicking my hair back, taking a deep breath of air. "You're trespassing again," I screamed, a short, sharp sound, and spun around, splashing water everywhere. Magnus was there. He was standing waist-deep in the water at the other end of the pool. How had I not seen him? He was moving silently, like a shark in dark water. And he wasn't wearing a suit. He was shirtless, water glistening on broad shoulders that looked like they could carry the weight of the entire kingdom. "You!" I sputtered, backing up until my back hit the tiled wall. "Do you ever announce yourself, or do you just spawn in random rooms to terrorize me?" "I live here, Vera," Magnus said calmly, cutting through the water toward me. "You are the one swimming in my pool in the middle of the night." He stopped 3 feet away. His eyes dropped to the waterline. I froze. I looked down. The white silk slip. Wet. When silk gets wet, it doesn't just cling. It disappears. It was translucent. I was effectively naked. "Don't look!" I shrieked, crossing my arms over my chest and sinking lower into the water until it reached my chin. "Turn around, pervert!" Magnus didn't turn around. He didn't look away. But he didn't leer either. His gaze was heavy, clinical, and intensely possessive. He looked at me like I was a problem he was trying to solve. "I have seen women before, Vera," he drawled, taking another step closer. The water rippled against my skin. "Though usually they are trying to get out of their clothes in my presence, not hiding in the filtration system." "I am not women," I snapped, my face burning. "I am your employee, and if you take one more step, I will—" "You will what?" Magnus challenged softly. He was within arm's reach now. The heat radiating off him warmed the freezing water. "Throw a bottle? Kick me? Spit?" "I'll splash you," I threatened weakly. It sounded ridiculous even to me. Magnus's lips quirked. A microscopic smile. Terrifying. I didn't think. I reacted. I cupped my hand and shoved a wave of chlorinated water right into his face. Splash. It hit him square in the eyes. Time stopped. Magnus stood there, water dripping from his eyelashes, running down his nose, sliding over his lips. He blinked slowly. He looked like a wet, angry god. "Oops," I whispered. He wiped his face with one hand. Then he lunged. He didn't hurt me. He moved faster than I could process, trapping me between his body and the pool wall. His hands planted on the tiles on either side of my head, caging me in. He didn't touch me, but he was so close that his chest brushed mine with every breath. "I am not my brother," he growled, his voice rough and low, vibrating through the water. "I don't play splash fights, Vera. If you want to play with me, the rules are different." My breath hitched. I looked up at him, water dripping from my hair. "What are the rules?" He leaned down. His nose brushed against mine. His eyes dropped to my mouth. "Rule 1, he whispered against my lips. "Don't start a war you can't finish. Because if you splash me again, I'm not going to splash back. I'm going to drag you under and see how long you can hold your breath." Chapter 12. The next morning, the atmosphere in the castle was weird. Magnus was nowhere to be seen. The staff whispered that the king was in high-level security meetings. I was in the gallery, trying to fix the mess Portia had made of the easel area, when the double doors swung open. Magnus walked in. He was wearing his signature charcoal suit, his hair perfectly styled, his expression stern. He checked his watch, then looked at me. "Vera, leave the brushes. We're leaving." I blinked, wiping paint off my thumb. "Leaving? I have a deadline. You said if I didn't finish the landscape by Friday, you'd double my debt." "Change of plans," he said briskly, checking his watch again. "I have a meeting at the Precipice Estate. I need an art consultant. You're coming." "But now, Vera." The command was sharp. I sighed. When the king commanded, you moved. I grabbed my bag and followed him out to the courtyard. A sleek black sports car was waiting, a Lamborghini that looked like the Batmobile had a baby with a stealth bomber. Magnus opened the passenger door for me. I slid in, surprised by the chivalry. Usually, he just waited for me to scramble. He got in the driver's seat, revved the engine, and peeled out of the driveway with enough force to snap my head back against the leather. We drove in silence for 10 minutes. He drove fast. Too fast. He was weaving through traffic, taking corners on 2 wheels. I gripped the handle above the door. "Magnus, slow down! You're driving like a maniac!" He didn't slow down. He sped up. "Magnus!" I yelled. He turned to look at me. And then he smiled. Not a small, rare Magnus smile. A wide, toothy, reckless grin. He winked. "Gotcha." My stomach dropped through the floor. "Miles?" I whispered. "Bingo." Miles laughed, hitting the gas pedal harder. "Man, you are so easy to trick. It's the suit, isn't it? Put on a tie and look grumpy, and suddenly everyone bows." "Stop the car!" I screamed, reaching for the door handle. It was locked. "This isn't funny, Miles. Magnus is going to kill you." "Mags is in a budget meeting for the next 3 hours," Miles said dismissively, drifting around a hairpin turn. "He won't even know you're gone." I was bored, Vera. You're always working. I wanted to take you for a spin. Loosen up. "I am being kidnapped," I shouted. "This isn't loosening up. This is a felony." "It's a joyride," Miles corrected. "Look at this view." We were on the cliff road now. The ocean crashed hundreds of feet below us. It was beautiful, yes, but I was too busy hyperventilating to appreciate it. "Take me back," I said, my voice shaking. "Now." "Relax," Miles said, reaching over to pat my knee. "We'll grab some lunch. I'll buy you a prettier dress than that rag, and we'll be back before—" He stopped. He looked in the rearview mirror. His smile vanished. "Uh-oh." What? I whipped my head around. Behind us, tearing up the asphalt like a demon out of hell, was a massive black SUV. It wasn't just driving, it was hunting. It was gaining on us with terrifying speed. Is that security? I asked. No. Miles swallowed hard, his hands tightening on the wheel until his knuckles turned white. That's Mags. I thought you said he was in a meeting. He must have felt it, Miles muttered. The twin bond. Or maybe he has a tracker on you. Probably the tracker. That sounds like him. The SUV rammed our bumper. Bam! I screamed. Pull over! I yelled. I can't! Miles panicked. He'll kill me! The SUV swerved into the oncoming lane, pulled up beside us, and then swerved hard to the right, cutting us off. Miles slammed on the brakes. The Lamborghini skidded, tires screaming, smoke filling the air. We spun 180 degrees and came to a halt inches from the guardrail. Dust swirled around us. My heart was trying to beat its way out of my throat. The door of the SUV flew open. Magnus got out. He wasn't wearing his suit jacket. His sleeves were rolled up. He looked like he was ready to dismantle the world brick by brick. He didn't look at the car. He looked at Miles. And for the first time, I saw real, unadulterated fear in Miles's eyes. Magnus didn't walk to the car. He stormed. He reached the driver's side. The door was locked. Magnus didn't ask Miles to open it. He grabbed the handle, braced his foot against the panel, and ripped. There was a screech of tearing metal that sounded like a dying banshee. The door groaned, the hinges snapped, and Magnus threw the entire metal door onto the road like it was made of cardboard. I stopped breathing. Miles shrank back into his seat, holding his hands up. Mags, wait, it was just a... Magnus reached in, grabbed Miles by his designer shirt, and hauled him out of the car. He slammed him against the hood of the Lamborghini. I told you, Magnus roared, his voice shaking the trees, to stay away from her. I was just taking her for lunch, Miles yelled back, though his voice cracked. She's fine. Look at her. She's fine. Magnus didn't look at me. He had his forearm pressed against Miles's throat. She is in a car doing 100 on a cliff road with a driver who treats physics like a suggestion. She is not fine. I'm the spare, Miles choked out. I'm allowed to have fun. You take everything so seriously. Because I have to keep you alive, Magnus shouted. He released Miles with a shove that sent him stumbling backward. You treat her like a toy, Miles, like a shiny new object to distract you from your boredom. She is not a toy. Magnus turned to me. The rage on his face vanished instantly, replaced by a frantic, terrifying concern. He walked around the car to my side. He didn't rip my door off. He opened it gently, though his hand left a dent in the metal handle. Vera, he breathed. Are you hurt? I shook my head, unable to speak. I was trembling. He unbuckled my seatbelt. His hands were shaking too. I thought it was you, I whispered. He looked just like you. He sounded like you. Magnus froze. He looked deep into my eyes. No, he said firmly. He didn't. You knew. You knew the moment he started driving. I bit my lip. He was right. I had known. The reckless speed, the wide smile, the lack of that heavy, grounding gravity that Magnus carried. I knew, I admitted. Magnus nodded. He reached in and pulled me out of the low seat. I stumbled, my legs jelly, and he caught me. He didn't set me down. He scooped me up into his arms, bridal style, holding me tight against his chest. I can walk, I protested weakly. Not today, Magnus growled. He turned and started walking toward the SUV, leaving Miles standing by the ruined sports car. "Mags!" Miles called out. "How am I supposed to get home? You tore my door off!" "Walk," Magnus said without looking back. "It'll give you time to think about your life choices." He deposited me into the passenger seat of the SUV and buckled me in himself. He got in the driver's side and started the engine. His knuckles were white on the wheel. "I'm sorry," I said quietly. "I shouldn't have gotten the car." Magnus didn't start driving. He turned to me. The intensity in the car was suffocating. "You can't tell us apart," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. "Visually, you are blind to the difference. He wears my suit. You think he is me. He uses my voice. You obey him." "You're identical," I defended. "It's not that easy." "It needs to be easy," Magnus snapped, "because next time, it won't be Miles. Next time, it will be an enemy wearing a mask. And if you get in the car with them, I might not get there in time to rip the door off." He leaned across the console, his hand cupped the back of my neck, his thumb tracing the sensitive skin behind my ear. "If you can't tell the difference with your eyes, Vera," he whispered, his voice dark and heavy with promise, "then I will have to make a mark on you that reminds you who you belong to. A mark that no one, not even my brother, would dare to touch." My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What kind of mark?" Magnus didn't answer. He just put the car in gear and drove. Chapter 14. The drive back to the castle was silent, but it wasn't the comfortable silence of a library. It was the heavy, charged silence of a bomb squad trying to decide which wire to cut. Magnus didn't let go of my hand. He drove with one hand on the wheel, the other gripping mine on the center console, like he was afraid I would vaporize if he broke contact. We pulled up to the main entrance. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the stone walls. "Go to your room," Magnus commanded, his voice rough. "The masquerade begins in 2 hours. You will attend. You will stand by my side, and you will not leave my sight." "And if I refuse?" I asked, testing the waters. Magnus turned to me. His eyes were dark pools. "Then I will chain you to the throne. Do not test me tonight, Vera. My patience for losing you is at 0. He squeezed my hand once, then let go. I scrambled out of the SUV and ran up the stairs. I needed a shower. I needed to wash the smell of burning rubber and Miles's cologne off my skin. I reached the guest suite and threw open the door. "Okay," I muttered to myself. "Get ready. Put on the dress. Survive the night." Magnus had ordered a dress for me. It was supposed to be hanging on the wardrobe door, a deep blue silk gown that matched the royal colors. I looked at the wardrobe. Empty. I frowned. I checked the bed. I checked the bathroom. I checked the floor. Nothing. On the vanity table, there was a single piece of paper. It was heavy, expensive stationery. "Trash belongs in rags. Don't bother coming downstairs. You'll only embarrass him. P&P, the Sterling sisters." Of course. I felt a sting of tears, but I blinked them back instantly. They wanted me to cry. They wanted me to hide in my room so they could hang off Magnus's arm all night. "No," I whispered. "Not today, Satan." I didn't have the blue dress, but I had access to the castle's attic. I had been up there yesterday looking for old varnish, and I had seen trunks. Old trunks. I ran up the spiral stairs to the dusty storage room. I tore open the first trunk. Moth-eaten curtains. The second trunk. Linens. The third trunk. It was wrapped in tissue paper. I pulled it out. It wasn't blue, it was black. Black velvet, heavy and rich, with a neckline that plunged dangerously low and a back that was completely open. It was vintage, maybe from the 1920s. It smelled like lavender and old money. I held it up. It was stunning. It was a villain's dress. Perfect, I grinned. An hour later, I looked in the mirror. The black velvet clung to every curve like a second skin. My hair was swept up, exposing the nape of my neck. I found a simple black domino mask in the trunk and tied it on. I looked dangerous. I looked like I belonged in the shadows. I walked down the grand staircase. The ballroom was packed. Music swelled. A waltz. Everyone was wearing masks, a sea of feathers and jewels. I hesitated at the bottom of the stairs. I didn't see Magnus. I didn't see Miles. A waiter passed by and slipped a folded note into my hand. Meet me on the east balcony. Alone. M. My heart skipped. M? Magnus? Or Miles trying to apologize? I shouldn't go. Magnus told me not to leave his sight. But if it was Magnus, he was waiting for me. And if it was Miles, well, I had a few choice words for him about the kidnapping. I turned and headed for the balcony doors. Chapter 15. The night air was cool against my bare back. The balcony was empty, bathed in silver moonlight. Below, the garden, the scene of the crime where I had spat on the shoe, was quiet. "Hello?" I whispered. A figure stepped out from the shadows of a stone pillar. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like armor. His mask was black leather, covering the upper half of his face, leaving only his jaw and mouth visible. He didn't speak. He just held out a hand. I hesitated. "Em? Is that you?" He nodded once. It had to be Miles. He was trying to make peace. Magnus would have barked an order. Magnus would have dragged me inside. This silent, gentle invitation felt like an apology. I took his hand. He pulled me close, not aggressively, but firmly. His hand settled on the small of my back, his skin hot through the velvet. He began to move. We waltzed in silence. No music, just the sound of our breathing and the distant strains of the orchestra from inside. He was a good dancer. Better than good. He led with a strength that made me feel weightless. I rested my hand on his shoulder, looking at the sharp line of his jaw. "I'm still mad at you," I whispered. He didn't answer. He spun me out, then pulled me back in, his chest brushing against mine. "You could have killed us today," I continued, assuming I was lecturing the reckless twin. "You treat everything like a game. The car, the kidnapping, me." He tightened his grip on my waist. His thumb brushed the bare skin of my spine, sending a shiver through me. I hesitated. "I wish Magnus was a little more like you. Just a little. He's so cold. He looks at me like he wants to consume me, but he never lets me in. He's terrifying." The man stopped dancing. He went completely still. His hand on my back didn't move, but the fingers dug in slightly. "Terrifying," he rasped. The voice was low, rough. It vibrated through my chest. It wasn't Miles's voice. My blood ran cold. I tried to pull away, but he held me fast. He stepped into me, forcing me back until my hips hit the stone railing of the balcony.
"Is that what you think?"
He growled, leaning down until his masked face was inches from mine.
"That I am cold?"
"Magnus?" I gasped. He reached up and ripped the black leather mask off. His eyes were blazing. There was no humor in them, no apology. Just a raw, naked hunger that made my knees buckle. "I am not cold, Vera," he whispered, pressing his body against mine, trapping me. "I am burning. I have been burning since the moment you looked at me with that defiant sneer in the garden. You think Miles is safer? You think you want the boy who plays games?" He grabbed my chin, tilting my head back. "Hate is not indifference," he hissed. "Hate is passion. If you find me terrifying, good. It means you understand the danger of being mine." I couldn't breathe. "I thought you were him. I thought—" "You thought wrong." Magnus cut me off. "Again. You confessed to the wrong brother. But lucky for you." He lowered his head, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. "I'm the one who listens." Chapter 16. I was trembling, actually vibrating. Magnus didn't let me recover. He took my hand and practically marched me back toward the ballroom doors. "Magnus, wait!" I pleaded, trying to keep up with his long strides. "My dress! The sister stole the blue one! I look like a villain!" He stopped at the glass doors. He looked me up and down, his eyes darkening as they traced the plunging neckline of the black velvet. "You look," he said hoarsely, "like a queen who just buried her enemies. It suits you." He kicked the doors open. We made an entrance. The music didn't stop, but the conversation did. Hundreds of heads turned. They saw the Alpha King, maskless and furious, dragging a woman in a scandalous black dress who looked like she had just been thoroughly ravaged on the balcony. Magnus walked us right to the center of the dance floor. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He stopped. He turned to face me. The Sterling sisters were in the front row. I saw Portia's jaw drop. She looked at my dress, then at Magnus's possessive grip on my hand. She looked ready to scream. Magnus let go of my hand. He looked at me. Then he looked down at my feet. "Your shoe," he said loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear. I looked down. My sneaker. Yes, I was wearing Converse under the gown because I refused to suffer, had an untied lace. "Oh," I said, blushing. "I'll get it." "No," Magnus said. And then, the king of the wolves, the butcher of the East, wait, no, we don't use that name, the alpha of alphas, dropped to one knee. The room gasped, a collective shocked intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the hall. "He's proposing," someone whispered. "He's kneeling," someone else hissed. Magnus didn't produce a ring. He reached out with his large, steady hands and took the dirty laces of my sneaker. He tied them. Slowly, deliberately. He made a perfect double knot. He didn't stand up immediately. He stayed on one knee, looking up at me. The position was the ultimate act of submission, yet he looked more dominant than ever. He rested his hands on my waist, his thumbs stroking the velvet. "You missed last time," Magnus said, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom. I froze. I knew what he was talking about. The garden, the spit. He tilted his head back, exposing his throat, a gesture of total trust, or total arrogance. "Spit on me again, Vera," he challenged, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that burned. "I dare you to disrespect your mate now." The word hit the room like a grenade. Mate. He hadn't just claimed me. He had declared war on anyone who dared to touch me. I stared at him, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would break my ribs. Magnus. He stood up slowly, towering over me, shielding me from the eyes of the court. Say it, he commanded softly. Mate, I whispered. Lies! The scream shattered the moment. We both turned. Portia Sterling was pushing through the crowd, her face twisted in ugly, desperate rage. Magnus sighed. Right on cue. Chapter 17. The word mate didn't just hang in the air, it detonated. The ballroom was dead silent. 500 of the country's most elite shifters were staring at us with their mouths hanging open. I was frozen, looking down at the top of Magnus's head as he finished tying the double knot on my sneaker, which I was wearing with a ball gown because my feet hurt, and apparently the king didn't care about dress codes anymore. Magnus stood up slowly, his tall frame blocking out the chandeliers. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at me, his eyes dark with that terrifying, consuming possessiveness that made my knees weak. Well, he murmured, his voice carrying through the silent hall. Are you going to spit on me again, Vera? Or are you going to accept that you won? I swallowed hard. I'm thinking about it. A corner of his mouth ticked up. Keep thinking. I like the chase. Lies! The shriek shattered the moment like glass. Portia Sterling burst through the crowd, her face a mask of twisted, mascara-smeared rage. Prudence was right behind her, looking frantic. It's a trick! Portia screamed, pointing a shaking finger at me. She's a fraud. She's a human commoner who smells like turpentine. She can't be the mate. She enchanted him. Magnus turned slowly to face her. His expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room plummeted. Portia, you are ruining the mood. I am saving you! Portia yelled, losing all composure. She marched toward us, her eyes wild. She is nothing. She destroyed the painting. She attacked me. She's a gold-digging witch who— Careful, Magnus said softly. You are speaking about your queen. She is not my queen! Portia lunged. She didn't aim for Magnus. She aimed for me. She reached out with clawed, manicured hands, intending to shove me or scratch me or rip the mask off my face. Magnus moved to intercept her, but I was faster. I had spent the last 3 weeks dodging ladders, falling paint cans, and identical twins. My reflexes were honed. As Portia lunged, I didn't back down. I stepped to the side, smoothly, calmly, and accidentally left my foot trailing just an inch too far to the right. Portia tripped over my sneaker. Her momentum carried her forward. She flailed, her arms windmilling, grasping for something to hold on to. She found the dessert table. Specifically, she found the 5-tier cascading Belgian chocolate fountain. Splash. It was spectacular. Portia face-planted directly into the flowing wall of warm chocolate. The structure wobbled, groaned, and then collapsed on top of her. Silence returned to the room. Then, slowly, Portia rose from the wreckage. She looked like a swamp monster made of fondue. Chocolate dripped from her nose, her eyelashes, and her ruined silver gown. A single strawberry slid off her shoulder and landed on the floor with a wet plop. Prudence gasped. Portia, your hair! The ballroom erupted. It wasn't polite laughter. It was roaring, hysterical laughter. Even the orchestra members were hiding grins behind their violins. You! Portia sputtered, spitting chocolate. She glared at me with murder in her eyes. "You tripped me, you clumsy little—" "I didn't trip you," I said innocently, leaning against Magnus's arm. "I was just standing there. You really should watch where you're going. It's a safety hazard." Magnus let out a single sharp laugh. He wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me flush against his side. "Security," Magnus called out. He didn't shout, but the guards appeared instantly. "Get this confectionery disaster out of my sight," Magnus ordered, gesturing to the chocolate-covered sisters, "and revoke their invitations, permanently." "You can't do that!" Prudence shrieked as the guards grabbed her arms. "Our father is the Duke of the Westlands. We own half the valley. You can't banish us." Magnus reached into his tuxedo pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen twice. "Actually," Magnus said, his tone bored, "I can. I just bought your father's estate. The transaction cleared 30 seconds ago." Prudence froze. "What?" "I bought the mortgage," Magnus clarified, showing her the screen. "And the land rights. And the country club membership. You're trespassing on my property as we speak. I suggest you go home and pack. You have until midnight to vacate." The crowd gasped. He had bought a dukedom in under a minute, just to make a point. "Magnus!" Portia wailed as the guards dragged her backward, her chocolate footprints leaving a trail of shame across the marble floor. "You'll regret this. She's not one of us." "No," Magnus agreed, looking down at me with a softness that made my heart ache. "She isn't. She's better." The doors slammed shut on the screaming sisters. Magnus turned to the crowd. "The show is over. Enjoy the buffet. Avoid the chocolate." He swept me up into his arms, lifting me bridal style before I could protest. "Magnus!" I hissed, grabbing his shoulders. "Put me down! Everyone is staring!" "Let them stare," he growled, turning toward the grand staircase. "They need to know who you belong to." "Where are we going?" I asked, breathless. He didn't look at me. He looked straight ahead, climbing the stairs 2 at a time, his grip on me tightening. "You paid your debt to the gallery, Vera," he whispered, his voice rough with adrenaline and need. "You restored the paintings. You survived the family. You even took out the trash." He kicked open the double doors to the royal suite, his bedroom. "But you still owe me for the spit on the shoe," he said, walking toward the massive 4-poster bed. "And I intend to collect the interest. Now." He dropped me onto the mattress. The silk sheets were cool, but the look in his eyes was scorching hot. "Negotiations are open, Miss Vera. Try not to miss this time." Chapter 18. I bounced slightly on the mattress, scrambling backward until my back hit the velvet headboard. Magnus didn't rush. He stood at the foot of the bed, unbuttoning his tuxedo jacket with maddening slowness. He tossed it onto a chair without looking, his eyes locked on mine. "Negotiations?" I squeaked, my heart rate doing somersaults. "I didn't bring my lawyer, or a notepad. I feel unprepared." "You don't need a lawyer, Vera," Magnus said, loosening his tie. He pulled the silk strip free and let it slide through his fingers to the floor. "You just need to answer one question, and if you lie to me, I will know." He crawled onto the bed. It wasn't a playful movement. It was a predator stalking prey. The mattress dipped under his weight. He moved on hands and knees, looming over me, trapping me between his arms. He stopped inches from my face. He smelled intoxicating, adrenaline, expensive cologne, and that underlying scent of ozone that always signaled a storm. "Do you want the spare?" he whispered. The vulnerability in his voice was stark, contrasting sharply with his dominant posture. Miles is easier. He smiles. He laughs. He won't challenge you. If you want him, say the word. I will let you go. I stared at him. I looked at the faint scar on his eyebrow that Miles didn't have. I looked at the tension in his jaw. I looked at the way his pupils were blown wide, swallowing the gold. Miles is nice, I admitted softly. Magnus flinched. He started to pull away, his expression closing off like a steel shutter. I reached out and grabbed his shirt collar, yanking him back down. But I don't want nice, I whispered against his lips. I want the storm. I want the man who rips car doors off hinges because he's terrified I'm hurt. I want the man who burns $1 million painting because someone made me cry. Magnus went still. His breath hitched. Prove it, he growled. What? Close your eyes, he commanded. If you know it's me, if you really know, then you don't need to see me. Prove that I am not just a face to you. I closed my eyes. The darkness heightened every other sense. I felt the heat radiating off his chest. I heard the frantic, heavy rhythm of his heartbeat. I leaned forward. I didn't reach for his hands. I buried my face in the crook of his neck, right where his pulse beat the strongest. I inhaled deep. It wasn't vanilla. It wasn't sandalwood. It was petrichor, the smell of rain hitting dry earth. It was cold wind and crushed pine needles. It was the scent of the library during the blackout. It was wild, ancient, and lonely. Rain, I whispered into his skin. You smell like the rain. I felt Magnus shudder against me. His arms wrapped around my waist, crushing me to him. This wasn't the tentative hold of a man unsure of his position. This was a claim. Finally, he groaned, burying his face in my hair. Finally. He kissed me. It wasn't a gentle movie star kiss. It was a collision. It was hungry and desperate, erasing weeks of confusion and games. I melted into him, my hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. For the first time since I arrived at this insane castle, I didn't feel trapped. I felt found. You are mine, Vera, he murmured against my mouth. No more running. No more guessing. You stay in the tower. You paint. You torment me. That is the contract. I'll need a race, I gasped breathlessly. I'll give you the kingdom, he promised. He moved to kiss my neck, sending shivers down my spine. The room was spinning. Everything was perfect. The villainous sisters were gone, the debt was paid, and the king was currently unraveling the back of my dress. Ring! The sound cut through the room like a fire alarm. It was a harsh, jarring, old-school telephone ring. Magnus froze. He groaned, resting his forehead against mine. Ignore it. If the castle is burning down, let it burn. Ring! It sounds important, I whispered, trying to catch my breath. It's your personal line, the one you said only 5 people have. Magnus cursed. He pulled away, sitting up on the edge of the bed. He reached for his phone on the nightstand, looking ready to fire whoever was on the other end. What? He barked into the receiver. I watched his back. I saw the muscles tense. I saw his spine go rigid. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. When? Magnus asked. His voice was different. It wasn't the alpha voice. It was smaller. He listened for another second. Then he hung up. He didn't put the phone down gently. He let it drop from his fingers onto the carpet. He turned to look at me. His face was pale. The confident, arrogant king was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had just seen a ghost. Magnus? I sat up, pulling the sheet around me. What is it? Is it Miles? Did he crash again?
No,
Magnus whispered. He ran a hand through his hair, messing up the perfect style.
it's not Miles.
He looked at me with genuine panic in his eyes.
That was security at the gate. My mother just landed.
I blinked. Your mother? The Dowager Queen? That's nice, isn't it? Magnus laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Vera, you don't understand. She wasn't supposed to return from exile for another 10 years. She hates humans. She hates artists. And she once poisoned a chef because the soup was lukewarm. He stood up, buttoning his shirt with trembling fingers. She isn't coming for a visit, Magnus said grimly. She heard I banished the Sterling sisters. She's coming to purge the castle. The bedroom door handle jiggled. Magnus! A shrill, imperious voice echoed from the hallway. It sounded like nails on a chalkboard, amplified by a megaphone. Open this door immediately! I smell cheap perfume and bad decisions. Magnus looked at me. Hide, he hissed. Hide? I scrambled off the bed. Where? The wardrobe, under the bed, anywhere. The door handle turned. The lock clicked. I dove behind the heavy velvet curtains just as the door flew open. Mother, Magnus's voice wavered. Don't mother me, you incompetent puppy, the voice sneered. Where is she? Where is the little rat who ruined my alliances? I held my breath, clutching the curtain. I had survived the twins. I had survived the sisters. But as the sound of high heels clicked ominously across the floorboards, I realized the real boss battle had just begun. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought spitting on a shoe was bold, wait until you meet the girl who actually shot an alpha. In the next story, our FMC blasts a trespassing wolf in the glutes with a BB gun, only for him to shift into the king and say, "Nice aim." You have to see this. Click the video on your screen right now to watch Varmints.